Let's have a look on what is happening also because of geography in Europe. Here you can see the mountains in various regions of Europe, the mountain ranges that are also implicating what can happen and what is happening in this region. We are adding also rivers, and make sure that you notice the flat part in the north, so-called North European Plain. This is crucial part concerning the relationship with Russia. Tim, you call this a gap. What this gap of North European Plain do for the politics between Russia and other European states?
It's been that way for centuries. The North European Plain is flat. It's a plain. And it starts in France, goes through Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, and then it begins to narrow. And where it narrows, that place is called Poland. And this is why Poland sometimes disappears from the map. And then it reappears, and then it changes shape. It's on the superhighway across Europe, because if you want to go into Russia militarily, you're not going to go through the Baltic, probably. You're not going to go over the Carpathian Mountains. You're going to go through that gap. And then it opens out this plain again into flatland, which is called Belarus and Ukraine, which is 300 miles from Moscow, flat all the way to the Urals Mountains. So now Russia has gone that way many times. It invaded Finland, it didn't go through Poland, but it invaded Finland, it invaded Czechoslovakia, it invaded Hungary, it invaded Poland, etc., etc. But it's also fair to say people went through that gap the other way. The Swedish Empire, Polish-Lithuanian Empire, Napoleon, 1812, the Germans, 1914 and 1941. So, in the Russian psyche, you can easily persuade the Russian population that if NATO is coming this way and they are told that Ukraine will come into NATO, then they are easily persuadable that this might be a threat. I think they're wrong. We've never been a threat to them in the last 30 years, but you can easily persuade the population of that, especially if you control the media in Russia, which Putin does.
And you said for Intelligence Square in March 2024, from the Russian perspective, you will seek to plug that gap either by having Poland as an ally, which is complicated, or occupying it, which is the usual solution. Yeah,
you block the gap so nobody can get through it. So that's why they occupied it in 45 and didn't let go, and would never have let go if communism had not fallen. So yeah, plan B, okay, we will dominate you. You will be friendly to us. Well, that didn't work either. Every single Warsaw Pact country, every single one of them thought, if we have a choice, we're not choosing you. We're choosing our friends over here. And so plan C is what they had to fall back on. Dominate the flatland of Belarus and Ukraine. And then that went wrong and we have a war.
And what about plan D, praying? What should be Putin praying for? Yeah, I read the book.
It's a joke I put in one of the books that every night he goes to bed and says, please God, build a mountain, build it in Poland, build it right down here so no one can come. But, you know, the bigger point there, of course, is that it is partially geography that has dictated this. Now, there's many, many other reasons. Well, there's the geography of the natural wheatlands of Ukraine, which they would love to dominate. It's the geography of the rare earth metals, which they would love. But there's also other things. For example, it makes him look bad, you know, if there's a flourishing, fledgling and problematic democracy growing in Ukraine, right next to his quasi-democratic dictatorship. So there's many other reasons, but do not overlook geography.
Speaking about geography, you climbed in Prisoners of Geography. Every leader seeking high ground from which to protect their tribe, since the very beginning of the humankind.
Forgive me, I've been to the Czech Republic many times and love it, but I don't know its topography well enough. But in the UK, when you're driving along the motorway, you will often see, sometimes you will see high ground, hills, and there will be ancient fortifications on them. Every culture has done this because for the very basic factor that if you are running up a hill to try and punch somebody, it's a lot easier for them watching you running up the hill and punching down. You know, it's as basic as that. Which is why we've always built on high ground, and why we see all the castles. Of course, you have many beautiful castles in the Czech Republic, in Czechia.
So we are just talking about a bigger scale, not a local scale, but a continental scale. But the principle is the same.
Yes. Well, I mean, maybe you'll come on to it, but it doesn't get much bigger or higher than the Himalayas. And, you know, there is a reason why people want to control both them and the bits each side of them.
And let's make a comparison of the geography, Europe and the US. Now you can see where the mountain ranges of the US are in the west part of the US, with the exception of California and the access to Pacific Ocean. This is the flat part with quite a lot of river, including Mississippi River. Why is this the winning of the lottery to be USA geographically?
I mean, wow. You know, really, it should be a minimum of 3 countries. You have the eastern seaboard, fantastic deep water ports, jagged coastline, deep water ports, good river system, good farmland. And then you reach the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, there's one country. But no, they kept going, they got over them. And here's the jackpot, the Mississippi River Basin. You saw all those rivers. They're flat, they're long. They don't go over waterfalls, most of them. Incredible farmland. The rivers connect to each other and then feed down into the Mississippi, which goes into what? New Orleans, one of the greatest ports in the world. So now you can actually export straight down there and out into the world, as well as coming from the eastern seaboard. And then on you drive, and this is the second country, on you drive and you get over the Rocky Mountains into what normally would be a third country, at least. But because they drove on ever westward into the Pacific seaboard, and the most important thing about this is that this now means they are a 2-ocean power. They can project power in 2 directions simultaneously, into 2 oceans. Nobody else can do this. Only the Americans, which requires a great navy. And then, as well as this incredible piece of real estate, your neighbors, you've got great neighbors. Above you are the Canadians, no threat, there's hardly anybody there. Most of it is hard rock ice. You can't build or live on it. That's why they all live very close to the American border. And then down south, you got the Mexicans, no threat. And between you and the population centers, big expanse of desert. This is why they're the greatest power in the world.
And the power may connect with others. This is what George Washington said during his farewell address in 1796. Nothing is more essential than that permanent, inveterate antipathies against particular nations and passionate attachments for others should be excluded. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world.
And here is the key. Here is the key to what's going on at the moment. That all generations do this. We mistake our current time for normal, whereas it's just our current time. And in Europe, we mistook the last 30 years as the new norm, meaning that, yes, we may have fought each other for 2,000 years, but because we have been friends with each other for 30 years, that's how it's going to be from now on, which I think is a very strange conclusion to reach, but many people did. So the Americans, many of whom, I know they stole the land and then they built on it with stolen labor. Fine, but not fine, but that's the way it was. But they did parcel it out after they'd stolen it, and they shared it out. And most of the people that came were coming from these old countries where they were not free, which were always fighting each other. And this was a new country doing things in new ways. And it said to itself, why would we entangle ourselves? They're a very long way away. We don't want to get involved. Later, they came up with something called the Monroe Doctrine in the 1820s, where, okay, Latin America, this is our area. Back off. But that quote from Washington is not as widely known as it should be. because there is in America this strain of isolationism that has been there from the beginning. And they only broke it, really, in 1917 when they came to Europe to help the British and the Allies against the Germans. And this is very important. The reason they did it was for democracy. And they don't want one big power dominating Europe, because it might look across to the Atlantic towards them. So they fought the Germans. Then they came back in 1944 for the similar reasons. And then they stayed in the Cold War, this time for Russia. And then they came in with Ukraine for the same reasons. And then something fundamental happened. The Russians proved they can't even reach Kyiv, never mind the Atlantic. And so the MAGA Americans think, what do we care? So, and that's when the Washington quote you quoted kicks back in. Don't involve ourselves with things that don't matter to us. I personally think it does matter. I think they're stronger with us and we're stronger with them, and we have shared values. But here's the thing. If you strip out shared values and shared principles, which the Trump administration does, it does not share our values and our principles. What are you left with? A pure transaction. That's why we are where we are.